Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and I'm so proud to be my dad's son. I just think the world of the guy. He is about 2 weeks from retiring from, I don't know how many years and years and years of doing the church thing, and he's off and ready to run the next deal. I think he might do a podcast, which would be kind of fun. If he does that, I'm going to bounce you his way because it'll be really fun. But when I was a kid, I was still proud of my dad. I just thought I knew everything, or I was a little puke and I would get impatient. And so I remember being maybe 9 or 10, and my parents bought me this calculator watch, and I got to thinking that Dad was taking too long in church every week when he was preaching sermons and stuff. So I would set the calculator watch to go off at exactly noon. And it was meant to be a hint. He didn't need to know that it was my watch. But of course, every time it would go off, I'd be like, oh no, what? Oh, that's so weird. How did that happen? That's really strange. And I'd fumble for it. But I'd fumble enough that I'd let it beep for a while so that the message would be sent. And I think passive-aggressively, my dad would just go longer when I did that, which was the right thing to do. I also remember after church sometimes being like, it is time to go home. There are things to do. I want food. I want to go play with friends. And so I would pull on my dad's arm and be like, Dad, come on. When he was talking with people and doing like his job and helping people and stuff. And looking back, I feel embarrassed that did not communicate how much I respect my dad and how proud I was then and am still to have my dad be my dad. I didn't get how I was coming off. I didn't understand the importance of what he was doing because I just didn't get it. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 12, Jesus' family just doesn't get it. For whatever reason, and we're going to break down different possibilities as to what that reason might be, they just didn't understand what he was doing or why people were listening. And so it looks like they've seen enough after 2 chapters of tension, and they are going to go find Jesus and bring him back from whatever weird road it is that he has decided to walk down and help him get his head screwed back on straight. Effectively, it looks like his family has showed up to conduct an intervention. The very end of Matthew chapter 12 goes like this. While Jesus was still talking to the crowds, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. And somebody told him, hey, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. And Jesus replied to him, who is my mother, and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and my sister and my mother. Now, I told you yesterday that this last passage in Matthew chapter 12 that we're going to look at today was going to be fun and interesting and dynamic and also controversial. And if you've ever been around Christianity for any length of time, or you know how the Christian family tree works, you are anticipating what the controversy is. It's Mary. It says his mother was outside. It doesn't call her by name, but it's his mother, it's mom, it's Mary. And Mary plays a pretty significant role in the minds of Christians throughout history. People held Mary in high regard, obviously, in the early goings of Christianity, but especially as you get into 18th, 19th, 20th century Catholicism, you see more and more titles, more and more attributes heaped upon Mary theologically, to the point where, well, now you kind of have 2 schools of thought when it comes to Mary. All Christians rightly understand that Mary is awesome. That Mary's the one who got confronted with this impossibly difficult situation, got given this very difficult news that she's going to be pregnant, and she's going to be pregnant with that kid, and also she's engaged right now, and she's not going to be pregnant by her fiance. This is pretty weird, but she says, may it be to me as you have said. And then she constructs this beautiful song that we call the Magnificat that's recorded over in the book of Luke that demonstrates that she was on board with the plan of God, which is awesome. And again, why she is highly regarded by all Christians. But over time, there's this divergence that occurs among Christians over what you make of Mary between Protestants and low church types and Catholics, and a little different point of divergence with the Eastern Orthodox types that would result in Catholics looking at Protestants and low church types and saying, you guys don't like Mary nearly enough. She was assumed into heaven. She did not bring original sin into the equation. She is the new Ark of the Covenant. She is the mother of God. She is the queen of heaven. And you Protestant low church types just don't appreciate that. Your Protestant low church types would look at that and go, whoa, where did all that come from? That feels like stuff that you guys added to the equation way after the fact. I don't see that character in the Bible. I see a really impressive person who was chosen by God for a unique purpose, who did really cool things, but also who looks like a human with normal human problems and normal human getting it rightness and getting it wrongness. And this passage is a pretty important one in that conversation. So, my friends, wherever you come down on this particular conversation, I understand that the views people hold on this can be very sacred and very important to them. I understand that some of you might be coming down on this conversation and you're like, I don't even care. Like, I don't know anything about this stuff. What do you Christians argue about things like this? Whatever the case, grace and peace to you. I just want to look at the text for what the text says. And if we see it differently, we see it differently. You got three basic possibilities that I see unfolding here as to why Jesus' family, led by his mother, show up to address Jesus. And I think we get a clue as to what their motivations are by the fact that they don't come in. Well, Mary didn't come inside. She was outside, and she was accompanied by brothers, which means you can't even play the patriarchy card here like, well, she couldn't have come in. She was a woman. Yeah, she could have. And why would she expect not to be well received by her son? No, she had every opportunity to come in. She didn't. Because, well, one possibility would be she didn't agree with what he was saying. She and the family thought he was wrong, and they didn't want to hear his teaching. Well, another possibility is that they just thought he was nuts. His mom thought he was nuts. The family members thought he was nuts, and they were here to collect him. They weren't going to go inside because they didn't want to make a big scene or ruckus. They didn't want to have that intervention in front of everybody. That would be uncomfortable, bad for their family name. So maybe that's what was going on. Or maybe they thought he had a point and there was something special about Jesus, but that he's just going to get himself killed if he keeps doing that. Now, think about the precipitating event that causes them to finally make this move and come and track down Jesus. I think the precipitating event is chapters 10, 11, and 12. In chapter 10, you've got the great big open world quest, and surely the family members would have found out, like, whoa, he has disciples, and they're going and doing things in his name, like kind of our name as a family? Okay. You've got John the Baptist, who seems to have been really on board with Jesus in the early going, but now he's wobbling and not quite sure what to make of Jesus, perhaps, and maybe that parallels the experience that Mary is going through herself. And so Jesus then rebukes the mindset of this generation and condemns like a bunch of the local communities. Like, can you imagine if you were a parent and your kid just came out with a great big microphone and just blasted and condemned 2 or 3 of like the other towns that you live around? You play against them in high school sports, and this is going to be really, really weird when we get together next time. Well, he does all of that, and things are getting crazy. Further, I think the precipitating event here is chapter 12 with the Sabbath controversies and Jesus just laying in to the Pharisees. I mean, they're trying to murder him. They accuse him of being in league with Satan. He fires back hard, shoots down their dumb ideas. Then it looks like they kind of try to make nice a little bit, and he shoots that down as well. He says that the men of Nineveh and the queen of the south are going to stand up in judgment one day of these religious leaders. I mean, he uses phrases like brood of vipers, and that maybe literally their exorcisms will result in everybody they exorcised being more possessed and in worse shape than if they just never interacted with the Pharisees at all, or maybe on a more grand figurative scale. He's just saying that in general, maybe everybody would have been better off spiritually if they'd never interacted with these Pharisees as well. And the very next thing is, while Jesus was still talking to the crowds, so Matthew is giving us another chronological clue to say, like, while this showdown is going on, that was too much. Mom and family, maybe they arrived partway through this speech. Maybe they've been lingering around on the fringes trying to see if what they've heard rumor-wise is true about what their kid, their brother is doing. And then they hear this, like, okay, all right, okie dokie, we're done here. Go get him. Bring him out. We need to talk to him right now. And so somebody pokes their head and is like, your mom and your brothers are outside. They want to speak to you. And Jesus, who in this very chapter, chapter 12, demonstrates that he knows what people are thinking without actually hearing them. He knows what they're out there to do. It's almost like this discreet little notification he got is something that he went very public with. Hey, just a heads up, my mom, my brothers, my family are outside. They want to talk to me. But you know what? That raises a question. Who is my mother and who are my brothers? Then he points to his disciples and he says, right there. Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. The turn of the phrase there, the imagery is not hard to see what he's doing. That anyone who's in service of the Father, who's a part of the kingdom by the work of Christ, is adopted as a son, a daughter, an heir of the kingdom. We get all of that language earlier in the Gospel of Matthew. So hearkening back to that language, Jesus is just following through on it logically and being like, well, anybody who's in the kingdom, like right there, you're my family. That's the real thing. You might be going, you're reading a little bit into that. You do this sometimes. You'll get to a passage and you'll be like, oh, here's how the things are. And no, under normal circumstances, I would say it is possible that I'm doing that thing I do where maybe I'm reading into it a little bit. And that's an easy mistake to make with the Bible. And I make that mistake. I'm not above that. But in this case, we have a parallel passage over in Mark 3 that is even more clear about what the motives are of Jesus' family in this situation. At Mark 3:20, it says, "Then Jesus entered a house, and a crowd gathered so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat." And then it goes on to say, when his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. Look, I'm not saying Mary is any less cool or awesome than the Bible holds her out as being. She's awesome. Blessed among women, above all women, is the language that I think they got used a little bit earlier with her. But look, the text is clear. She was wrong. The text does not describe Jesus as being out of his mind. Mary was out of touch with what was going on, and her actions here were incorrect. Now, I think Jesus is going to be really empathetic to that, because there's another family member who played a very important role early in his life in John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was spot on in chapter 3, and then he was wobbling in chapter 11. Okay, so Mary was spot on in the early going, and then she wobbles a little bit right here. No shame, no harm, no foul. And it is only because of the debates in the history of the church and the history of Christianity that we're even lingering on this question of Mary. The text doesn't even treat it as contentious. Really, the key question of the passage isn't, could Mary get things wrong? Was she fallible? Obviously, she could get things wrong. Obviously, she is fallible, according to the text. The bigger question is, why is this happening here, and why is Jesus saying it now? Well, reason number one, because his family showed up at this time. But reason number two, because things are getting crazy. Who is with me? Jesus has just fired all of these shots that could be seen as shooting himself in the foot, alienating himself from everybody, the crowds, the mindset of the day, the popular approach to things, even seemingly alienating himself from his own family. But at this point, at least, his family doesn't seem to understand him. They don't seem to understand the kingdom thing. They don't seem to understand that he is bringing about the truest, realest thing ever, but the disciples kind of do. So it is the disciples who have the thing that is thicker than familial blood, and that is citizenship in the kingdom of heaven, sonship, heirship, I don't think heirship is a word, in the kingdom and under the authority of the king. Lots of people are probably pretty mad at him right now. It might seem like his support system is eroding and he's making powerful enemies, but the text makes it look like he knows exactly what he's doing, and that he knows that this kingdom thing and the kingdom citizens who are with him, that's a bigger deal than all of that outside pressure and all of the tension that we've seen ratcheting up in chapters 11 and 12. Thanks for gaming it out with me, my friends. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.